Hello, Kathy, and welcome to Rushana's Mindset Lab. I'm really, really happy that you found an hour of your time to come and talk to us about your journey.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you. So we first had a proper, meeting and face-to-face kind of discussion quite recently at Aston University when I was seeking a bit of mentoring about my career development. And I was really amazed at your interesting and very unconventional journey that you're coming from business background into academia and being professor of professional practice. Even that is quite innovative and inspiring. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Can I ask you first to share what is it that you do at the moment? Just share a little bit about your role.
Yes, of course. So I have a dual role at Aston University in Birmingham. So first of all, I'm a professor of practice, and I was the first university's professor of practice, so I became that last summer. And it's recognising really my industry background and the varied background that I bring to the role. But my academic area is employment law. And I always refer to that as my first love because I just find employment law absolutely fascinating and I really do enjoy it. And that's what I teach at Aston. But most of my time at Aston is spent being Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor engagement. What does that mean? Well, Aston has what we refer to as the engagement portfolio, which was introduced as a result of our university strategy, which is structured around 3 beneficiary groups, and they are students, business and the professions, and reason and society. And when that strategy was put in place around those 3 beneficiary groups, what the university said, well, we need some sort of structure that is looking at how we are supporting those 3 groups. And therefore the engagement portfolio was created, and it covers a very broad range of things. So all the alumni support, business engagement, regional engagement, marketing, recruitment, admissions, international, and all of student support services and careers and placements. And we have a Deputy Vice Chancellor who heads up that very broad portfolio. And I work directly for her on a range of projects and activities across the portfolio. So that's my job really. And I often refer to it as being the business side of the university. And I think what's been particularly fascinating in the time that I've done this role, and I've been in this role for just over a year, is the number of things that go on behind the scenes in a university that I never knew happened, but are really important. Governance issues, but also to make it run so that we give the right support to our beneficiaries. So it's a very varied and a very interesting role.
Yes, it does seem to cover a lot of different areas. Wow. I guess it's very busy as well in terms of work life.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so Kathy, can you tell me then just share your journey, how you started?
Okay, you referred to it already as being unconventional. It has had a number of twists and turns. So when I left university a long, long time ago, I had a psychology degree and I went into human resource management. And one of the things that I think a lot about careers is that they quite often are a bit of a chapter of accidents and events that occur that you would not have planned. And indeed my planning to go into HR was I didn't know what to do with my degree. I was chatting to somebody on my course who said I want to work in personnel, as it was called in those days. It wasn't called human resources in those days. And I said, what's that? And she told me what it was, and I thought, oh, that sounds good, I'll apply for that. So that was my great career planning in terms of going into personnel management. And I became a graduate trainee at Land Rover, as it was then, Jaguar Land Rover as it is now, and did my traineeship. And then I moved to Avery, GEC Avery as it was, Avery Berkel, I think it now is, which is a weighing machine manufacturer based in the West Midlands, had around 2,500 employees at the time. And I had a number of different roles there. I, at one stage, worked for the GEC group that we were part of. So that involved a lot of European travel and North America as well. I then moved back into Avery itself, and I became head of HR for the manufacturing part of the business. And then just over 25 years ago, I had my first child, and I know that women can work and raise a family, but 25 years ago, it wasn't as easy as it is now. And also my husband and I felt strongly that we wanted one of us to be home with the children, as it became. I had 2 children. And so I gave up. But work mattered so much to me. It was really difficult. And so I think actually before my son was born, and I only went on maternity leave about 3 weeks before he was born, but before he was born, I'd already got my first piece of consultancy work. And I just set up my own consultancy, and I'd always wanted to write. That had been a big ambition of mine, and I had actually written a book when I was 13. It was never published, I hasten to add, but I really wanted to write, and I just sent letters around to various organisations saying, can I write something about HR for you? And there was a correspondence company, ICS, who said, yes, will you write some material that related to the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development Standards, the CIPD. And I wrote for them, and they gave me that break. I'd never written anything before. And I then went on to do lots of writing for lots of organisations. I wrote my first book, which was an employment law textbook, which is now in its 6th edition. I wrote another 4 books on top of that on various HR topics. And increasingly, I started talking about employment law. So I started specialising in employment law. And as the kids got older and they started school, it was easier to fit things around them. And also, I did find that I love writing, but it's a little bit lonely. And so just after my daughter was born, I sent a CV into Aston University and said, do you need any sessional lecturing? Just coming and going, doing a bit of lecturing, not a permanent job. And they said yes. So I actually have been working at Aston for nearly 23 years, most of it as a sessional. So all these sorts of opportunities come your way, really, and it's a matter of taking the opportunities as they arise. And then once I was at Aston, carried on doing my consultancy because I was just a sessional. And then 8 years ago, I think, I became a permanent member of staff, and I've worked through the ranks of doing various jobs until I'm in my current one as Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much for condensing it into just a couple of minutes discussion. Okay, so I would very much like to unpick a few things there. So when you set up your own consultancy, what gave you, how did you find the courage to do this?
Well, at first it was just sort of like a bit of a hobby. I mean, I did do it properly. So I registered it as a limited company and got my accountant, you know, so it was done properly, but it was really, I'm not very good with babies and toddlers. And I needed something that was intellectually stimulating. I needed something for me. It was really difficult walking away from being head of HR in a busy, unionized organization to looking after a baby. I mean, I love my children, don't get me wrong, but I just needed something for me. So at first it was just a bit of a hobby, but it became something where I was turning over a decent amount. And I guess it was just at first, well, writing to people and saying, would you like me to do some work for you? And if they didn't reply or they said no, so be it, let's ask the next person. And so, yeah, maybe if I look back, how did I find the courage? I don't think I really thought I was doing anything very brave at the time.
Wonderful. I really like how you talk about just writing to organizations as it's, an easy peasy thing, because for a lot of people, I guess the fear of being rejected, the fear of not succeeding stops us from even attempting. So how did that feel for you, approaching companies? And do you remember any rejection letters, anyone being particularly helpful or unhelpful in their replies?
Oh, yeah, there's been ups and downs. I remember more people not replying than rejection letters, maybe. There have been, not many, but there have been some organisations that I've worked for which haven't worked out. And that has been for a variety of reasons. I remember one that I worked for where I was writing about employment law, and they just wanted me to write with a different slant, where I just felt it was giving bad advice that they wanted me to do, and I wouldn't do it. And so we fell out and parted company. That was a little bit painful. But I guess because my husband and I had worked out that I was going to be the one that would stop my job, and he would be the earner. If I got rejected, it wasn't that I had to work, it was my choice, and therefore the rejection was less painful. I would imagine if you're setting up your own business and you've got a financial target that you've got to hit and an amount of work you've got to get, then it's probably a lot harder. But yeah, of course, whenever anything doesn't work out, that's a little bit painful, and it can happen in a permanent job as well. And I guess what you learn is to think about, what can I learn from that? Dust yourself down, get back up, and get on again. And I think in everybody's career, they can look back and point to the times when it's not gone well.
Of course, yeah. So that building that resilience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, Kathy, if you don't mind, do you have any entrepreneurs in your family? Is that something that you kind of were brought up with? No?
Oh, no, not at all. No, I come from a background where I think everybody in my family is a teacher, a school teacher.
Oh.
And so the one thing I always knew was I didn't want to be a school teacher.
Okay.
No, not at all. All very conventional jobs.
Okay. Very interesting. So can you tell me about your experience of writing your first book?
Oh, yes. So this came about from the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development I've referred to. So I had written to them and said, do you want me to write anything for you? And I'd actually started doing some writing for them. And what I was doing was I was writing training courses. So if you go on a CIPD training course, you get what I always refer to as a book, almost, some chunky notes. And I was writing those for them and updating them. So whenever a course ran again, because the thing is with employment law is it's always changing. So there's always more work to be done. And so I was contacted by CIPD Publishing, that no longer exists. It's actually gone into Kogan Page now. And they had identified a gap. They'd got a long-standing employment law textbook, but it was very much pitched at people that already knew something about the law. And they didn't have a book for somebody that was coming along that knew nothing or knew very little. And so they asked me if I would be interested in writing one. And I remember it well because the phone call came when my mum and dad were visiting. And my dad had written a number of textbooks in physics many years ago. And I was just so thrilled to be asked. And as I say, I'd always wanted to write a book. And it just felt, well, Dad did textbooks and now I'm going to do it. And so I just said, yes, yeah, please, I'll write it. I remember coming off the phone and how thrilled my dad was. And I didn't know much. I have no qualifications in employment law at all. And so there was a lot to learn about the way to communicate. Obviously, I knew about employment law, but it's all self-taught. And when you're writing a book, you've got to be 100% right. So there was a lot of work that had to go into thinking about how you're going to communicate it. And also with the law, when you're writing for somebody that doesn't know anything about it, you've got to write in a straightforward way, but you've got to take something that often is quite complex and make it straightforward, but still keep it accurate. And that isn't the easiest thing to do. And so I wrote the book chapter by chapter, and I sent each chapter to my mum and dad, and they read it, and they would come over once a fortnight to see their grandchildren. And when the kids had their rest, they would sit there and tell me what they thought about the chapters and go through it line by line. And my husband read every chapter as well and gave his feedback. And it was so thrilling when it was published. Yeah.
And you didn't consider saying no to something that you weren't
No.
100%
No, I wanted to do it.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. That's very interesting. And I'm curious, from marketing point of view, clearly you were the person to go to for this purpose. If they were to find someone to write this book, they straight away thought of you. How did that happen? Did you do any profile building or?
No. I've never done any profile building or anything like that. No, it was what I found in a lot of the work I've got is when you're doing one thing, you get known for it, and then you get asked to do the next. So it was because I was already working with CIPD and writing these courses that CIPD Publishing were in the same building as the people that I was working with on the training course side, and they just talk to each other. So quite a lot of my work has come through word of mouth. But so I don't use social media, for example. I don't really know much about it, and I've never done any sort of profile building or anything like that. No.
This is very interesting and very unconventional as well. Okay, thank you for this. So, Kathy, moving on then, when you started working at Aston as a sessional, so teaching, was it employment law as well?
No. I started teaching HR generally. So there was a HR module, and I also taught learning and teaching, I think, in the first year.
And how was the transition?
Oh, well, that was very interesting because I'd never taught. So I walked into a lecture room with postgraduate students, and I'd never taught anybody anything. And so again, rather unconventional. My first year, I think I was probably a pretty poor teacher. And you get the module feedback and you think, ouch, I didn't do that very well, did I? But you learn from it. And there was a colleague at Aston who is still a very good friend to this day, who sort of pointed out a few things to me about ways I could do things better. I do remember that. But I guess what I do enjoy is talking, and teaching in many ways is talking in an engaging way. And it's putting over your subject in a way that engages people. And I think what has always worked is that because I have the practitioner background, I could be saying to students, so this is what it's really like. We can teach the theory of how you negotiate with trade unions, but I can tell you what it's really like. And I can tell you what it's like when they walk out on you. And I can tell you what it's like when it turns into a shouting match. And I can tell you what it's like when you've got such good relationships that you go down the pub with the trade union reps. And I can tell you lots of other tales about it all. And that's what engages students. So to this day, when I go into a lecture room, it's like, oh yeah, I've got a couple of hours when I can just talk about something I'm really passionate about. What a privilege. And I just love it.
Wonderful. I definitely would so love a lecture like this, sharing those insider real practitioner stories. What I'm really curious about is that resilience of yours where you said yes to something you've never done before and you're absolutely fine about, well, you seem to be really cool about it. Is that something that we can all learn by just shifting our attitudes, or is it something perhaps that's innate to some people?
It's interesting question, because if I had to, if I was approaching my appraisal, which I am actually in a few weeks' time, and I had to say, what would I say is my weakness? If I was asked that question, I would say is I'm not very resilient. So it's interesting that you pick up on that. And I guess, so let's reflect on that. I guess it's resilience in different ways. Mm-hmm. So in terms of try something you've not done before, well, why not? If you want to do it, just why not do it? Where I'm not particularly resilient is when I feel I can't do it, and then I will start getting worried about something. Mm. And so I think what I've learned is have a go, and if you can do it, then, and you want to do it, then why not? But also to not be afraid to say, actually, help, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I guess I'm thinking more as I've moved into the business side of the university, as I say, I've come across things I never knew even existed or that we had to do, that I've had to learn to say, I don't know, and can we talk about this, and go away and research it as well. But we all have our weaknesses, and we all have the things that dent our confidence, but also to be good at what you do, I think, is important, because if you have that confidence that you know what you're doing, that goes a long way to building your resilience. So I always say that there is something very relaxing about going and doing an employment law lecture, because in my arrogance, I would say that whatever anybody asks me, I can answer. Whereas some of the more difficult things that I tackle on the business side of the university, somebody could ask me a question that I can't answer. And so that is more challenging, but isn't that great? So, okay, ask me something, I can't answer it, I'll go and find out, and then I'll answer it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So speaking of other challenges in your current role now, I guess my first question is, how is your work-life balance?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And I was listening to an honorary graduate yesterday receive their honorary degree, and they made a comment about work-life balance. And I can't remember exactly what they said, but it made me think, so what is life? And what is work? And what do I mean by that? So when my children were little, my priority was spending time with them, and being there to take them to school, pick them up from school, go to all the things that you go to as parents. That was my priority. Neither of my children live at home. They both forged their own careers and living with their partners elsewhere in the country. And I love seeing them, and we see them regularly. And that is a priority of mine. But when we come to the normal week, my work is partly my life, because I enjoy it so much. So yes, I work long hours, but it's not like my work is a burden and it's conflicting with my life, because it is what I enjoy doing. And yes, there's a time to turn the computer off, and yes, I do, but quite often my head's there in work, even, I'm thinking things through, and I enjoy the buzz of work. So I don't do a huge amount of things outside of work, and I think there is work, there is life, and there's a big grey area for me that is a bit of both.
Very interesting. Thank you. And on to other challenges then. What do you think was the most challenging aspect of, from mindset point of view, moving into your role? Maybe to deal with people management, maybe processes management, maybe, as you said, that thing where you have to say, actually, I don't know right now, or maybe something else.
Yeah, I think it's been different challenges at different times. I think when I was balancing work around the children, that could be difficult. You've got a deadline, and you know, do you put the children in front of the television, or do you miss? Oh, I've never missed a deadline, but how do you balance that? And I think that tug all the time was quite difficult. Now, what are the particular challenges? I do have to deal with some tricky situations, and sometimes the tricky challenge is seeing your way through something that is quite difficult, and just working out what the right thing is to do, because there is no right or wrong answer, and you've got to work out what you think is the best. And that is where having somebody that I work with, my boss, who I get on with very well, but who I can talk to and talk things through, is really, really helpful.
Very interesting. Okay, so on to my final question. I cannot believe how half an hour just went by very quickly. What advice can you give to others, either wanting to go into academia or start their consultancy, because it's all about development and just doing interesting things in life professionally, right? Is there any advice in addition to what we discussed already?
Do something that you really enjoy doing, I think would be my big advice. So when people talk about wanting to go into academia or wanting to set up their consultancy, what is it that you want to do? What is it that's giving you that buzz? One of the things I do is talk on the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Programme, and also the Small Business Growth Programme at Aston. And so I've talked to an awful lot of people that have set up their own businesses over the years, and they're passionate about what they do. And so only do it if you really want to do it, and be passionate about what you want to do. Partly because then this whole work-life balance issue becomes less of a problem, because you're loving what you're doing. But also, we spend an awful lot of our time working. So it's so much better if you're doing something that you actually enjoy doing. So I think that is important. And the other thing is, take advantage of the opportunities as they come, and don't plan out too rigidly. My daughter, my younger child, started a graduate scheme 2 years ago, and when she went on to the grad scheme, she had to develop a learning plan and a development plan. And so she said, "Mum, what should I put in it?" And I said to her, "Well, don't put anything too rigid. In fact, even question why you're doing it, because it's going to be the opportunities that come up that are important. And if you've said in 12 months' time you want to do this, and in 18 months' time you want to do that, then you're forcing yourself down a route that might actually stop you taking advantage of opportunities you haven't even dreamt about yet." So she did actually go back to her employer and say, "Well, I'm not sure about doing these plans," and explained that you have to take the opportunities that come. And I think that's a big thing. Take the opportunities that come and do things that you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, then take a little bit of a change and do something different.
Excellent. And actually, one other final question. What does the future hold for you? I know you mentioned no rigid planning, but do you have any perhaps vision, any other plans aspirations?
No, I don't, because I very much work on the basis of, well, let's see what happens next. Aston, we have a new Vice Chancellor arriving shortly, and next month actually, and so that will give probably some change of direction, or it will bring new challenges, it'll be new things, so that will be an interesting time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that brings, but no, I'll see what happens, I think is my answer to that question.
Fantastic. Kathy, thank you so much for coming and sharing some parts of your journey and mindset lessons. It's been a true pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.